trying to keep tabs on how governments are actually performing, whether they're really making good on those promises for, well, a better society. It often feels like a real uphill battle.
It does. That path from saying you'll do something to actually seeing results on the ground, it's rarely simple.
Exactly. And that's why things like the criticality analysis of governance issues can be so helpful.
Absolutely. That analysis coming from the Ayman and I Center for Policy and Education, it really tries to dig beneath the surface of what the government's doing.
Yeah, it's not just a thumbs up or thumbs down, is it?
Not at all. It uses narrative analysis, looking at news from reliable sources, and it groups things under 6 key themes. The whole point isn't just what happened, but more the significance,
Yeah.
the actual impact.
Which brings us right here to today's deep dive. We're going to focus on some really key governance issues that popped up in their analysis for April 6th to 12th, 2025. And this is all based on the sources you shared with us.
Right. And our goal, like always, is to pull out the insights that really matter for you.
So what's on the agenda from that week?
Well, it was quite a mix, actually. We're going to talk about public whistleblowing by MPs in Ghana, always a fascinating topic.
Mm
Then there's the whole ongoing debate around legalizing Okada,
-hmm.
commercial motorbikes,
A big one.
huge. Then the government's move to suspend post-retirement contracts,
Okay.
the really worrying and long-running conflict in Bawku.
Yeah.
And finally, we'll look at Gabon's recent transitional election and ask, well, could it offer some kind of model for countries in the Sahel, like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger?
Wow. Okay. That's a lot to get through. Let's jump right into that first one. The public whistleblowing by Ghanaian MPs. The analysis mentions this idea of dual faces right away.
Yeah, that's the core tension, isn't it?
Hmm.
Are these MPs acting as sort of guardians looking out for the public, or is there sometimes an element of, well, opportunism involved?
What's your take on that tension?
Well, it's interesting because whistleblowing itself, generally speaking, is vital, right, for transparency, for accountability. And Ghana even has the Whistleblower Act from 2006. The intention behind it is good, protect people who expose wrongdoing, promote integrity.
But the analysis says the act has problems.
It does. It points out weaknesses, things like its scope is a bit limited, the protections maybe aren't strong enough in practice.
And just making it work on the ground seems tough. I think it mentions secrecy issues, maybe no specific body really driving it, people not knowing about it.
Exactly. Lack of public awareness, rewards that don't really incentivize, not enough safeguards. It seems the framework itself could be stronger.
And how does this intersect with MPs specifically? Because they already have an oversight role, don't they?
Precisely. They're supposed to be holding the government accountable. And to do that well, they need good information. Reliable data is key.
But the worry is they might use disclosures for political points.
That's the concern, yeah.
Yeah.
Using it for political gain, maybe to score points against rivals, which, could end up damaging public trust, or even spreading information that's not quite accurate.
It's that tension again, public good versus maybe political strategy. How do you make sure it's about genuine duty, not just partisan advantage?
That's the million-dollar question in governance, isn't it?
The analysis gives some concrete examples that really highlight this. First, Honorable Kennedy Apong's Who Watches the Watchmen series back in 2018.
Ah, yes, targeting the journalist Anas Aramayal Anas.
Right. And it led to Anas's associate, Ahmed Swale, being publicly identified, and tragically, he was later murdered. That feels like a really stark ethical dilemma.
It really does. Sensitive information, journalist safety. It's incredibly serious. The consequences were devastating.
And the analysis notes a suspect was arrested in Swale's murder just this past March, a recent development.
Which is significant, yes. But the whole incident really underlines the risks and the responsibility involved when you make these kinds of public allegations, especially about individuals.
Then there's Honorable Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa between 2021 and 2024. He raised issues about former President Akufo-Addo's private jet travel and the National Cathedral finances.
Right. Those disclosures definitely got people talking about potential wasteful spending, alleged mismanagement.
So that seems like an example of using the platform for accountability.
It certainly can function that way, bringing potential financial issues to light. But again, the analysis hints at that dual face. Was it purely about protecting public funds, or was there also political leverage involved, perhaps aimed at the government of the day?
It's rarely black and white, is it?
Very rarely.
And the third case mentioned, Honorable Reverend John and Tim Forger's claims in March 2025 about air ambulances and alleged drug trafficking. That seemed to blow up quite fast.
It did. A public disagreement, even an attempted arrest mentioned.
That sounds like a clear risk of misinformation if claims are made publicly without maybe solid proof first. It could even get in the way of a proper investigation.
Exactly. That line between transparency and just spreading unsubstantiated claims can get very blurry very quickly. And it damages trust in the whole process. Might even let actual wrongdoers slip through the cracks.
So looking at all these examples, it really paints a picture of whistleblowing by MPs as, well, a double-edged sword,
That's a good way to put it. Huge potential for accountability.
but also a real risk of being used for political games or spreading things that aren't fully checked out.
And MPs, they want to show their constituents they're working, get attention. Using these public platforms is part of that.
So the takeaway is, we need MPs to be responsible when they do this. And maybe the rules around whistleblowing themselves need strengthening.
That seems crucial. Responsible use plus a stronger legal safety net. That's key for it to actually work as intended, promoting integrity.
Okay, let's shift gears. The next topic. Leveraging these harmless and crimeless economic ventures, focusing on legalizing Okada. Those motorbikes are everywhere in Ghana.
Absolutely everywhere. A huge part of the economy for so many people.
And the analysis points out that this informal sector Okada, but also traffic hawking, the kayai or head porters, it's massive, but often ignored in policy.
That's a key insight. These sectors provide livelihoods for countless people, yet they often exist on the margins, policy-wise. Formalizing isn't just about rules, it's about recognizing and potentially empowering a massive part of the economy.
And describing Okada as harmless and crimeless income, it emphasizes that for many, it's just a way to make a living, right? Doesn't need huge startup cash.
Exactly. So the proposal to legalize and regulate, what's the thinking there?
Well, the analysis outlines two main goals: safety and formalization.
Okay.
So bringing Okada into the formal system, things like licensing riders, making sure they get training, checking the bikes regularly,
Safety gear, like helmets, age limits maybe?
all of that.
Right.
The aim is to turn it from this kind of informal necessity into a properly recognized, regulated industry. Makes sense for safety. But the analysis also talks about bigger potential benefits.
Oh, definitely. Think about it. If these operators are formally recognized, they might suddenly get access to things like Social Security or microfinance.
Ah, okay. So moving from informal to formal could really change lives. Not just income, but access to financial tools, maybe even things like pensions down the line.
Precisely. It's potentially transformative. Access to credit, insurance. It empowers people who are often in quite vulnerable situations.
And the training aspect.
Also key. Better safety, obviously, but also makes the operators more professional, more competitive, perhaps. And formalizing one sector like Okada could even boost other local economic activity. Kind of a ripple effect.
Interesting. And the analysis connects this to other informal work, like the hawkers and kayai, saying they often lack even basic things like dedicated market spaces.
Yeah, it suggests maybe similar ideas, modernization strategies could apply there too.
So instead of just seeing them as a problem, look at how to support and integrate them.
Exactly. Respect their contribution, improve conditions, integrate them better. The analysis mentions rickshaws in Asia as an example.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, how they went from basic manual rickshaws to motorized ones, now often linked up with digital apps. It's become a huge market, billions of dollars.
Wow. So Ghana could look at things like digital platforms for Okada, maybe certification for riders, linking them to finance.
It suggests those kinds of avenues are worth exploring. Digital platforms to coordinate, certification to build trust, microfinance to help operators upgrade their bikes or business.
So what are the key things needed policy-wise to make this work? For Okada or even those other sectors?
The analysis flags a few critical things. First, the rules need to be inclusive. Like, if you have age limits for Okada riders, what support is there for younger people? Training, maybe apprenticeships.
Right, don't just exclude them.
Exactly. Second, physical infrastructure matters. Designated spots for vendors, maybe modernized marketplaces.
Okay.
Third, those digital platforms could be really important for managing things efficiently, connecting riders and customers, handling payments.
And finally,
Collaboration. Government needs to work closely with finance people, insurance companies, tech companies, everyone pulling together to make it sustainable.
it really sounds like a chance to build a more sort of inclusive economy, one that actually values these informal
I
contributions.
think that's the potential, yes.
Yeah.
Tackle the lack of regulation, the lack of social safety nets, limited finance. You could unlock a lot of economic energy and really improve people's lives.
Okay, let's move to the third topic. The government suspending post-retirement contract appointments in the public service. This kicked in April 2nd, 2025. Seems like a big shift.
It is quite a significant policy change, yeah. The directive came from Dr. Callistus Mahama, the secretary to the president.
Bet there was an exception.
Yes, a notable one for academics in public universities. The education minister, Haruna Idrisu, clarified that. The idea seems to be retaining crucial experience and mentorship within the universities.
Now, previously, these contracts were used quite a bit, weren't they, to keep experienced hands on deck, ensure continuity.
They were. Leveraging expertise, maintaining institutional memory, those were the arguments for them.
But there are criticisms, too, like blocking younger people from moving up and adding to the wage bill.
Exactly that. Concerns grew about hindering career progression for younger public servants, and yes, the cost implication for government spending.
So the government's stated aim now is, what, reshaping the workforce?
Pretty much. Recalibrating the workforce, creating more openings for fresh talent to come in and contribute.
But isn't there a risk of losing all that valuable experience? The institutional knowledge those retirees have?
That's definitely a concern raised. The analysis mentions experts suggesting transitional measures to soften that blow.
Like what?
Things like well-structured mentorship programs where retirees guide newer staff, or maybe part-time consulting roles, advisory positions, ways to tap into their expertise for a limited time while still making room.
So the message isn't just cut costs. It's more about modernizing the public service, bringing in new perspectives.
That seems to be the framing, yes. A deliberate push towards modernization, fresh ideas.
But success depends on getting the details right.
Absolutely. The analysis stresses that. You need careful policy calibration. Protect vital expertise where needed, but also make sure it's inclusive and promotes growth overall.
So it's a balancing act, fiscal prudence versus keeping expertise versus modernizing.
Precisely. Finding that sweet spot will be the real test of whether this suspension achieves its long-term goals effectively.
Okay, now on to a very difficult subject, the Bawku conflict. The analysis describes it as a national crisis now, spreading beyond its original area.
Tragically, yes. It's escalated far beyond a localized issue between the Kusasi and Memprusi communities. It's affecting neighboring areas, destabilizing things more broadly.
And attempts by previous governments haven't worked.
Sadly, no. That's why there are these urgent calls now, like from President Mahama and James Agalga, supported the Asatini Otumfuoze Tudidi II, taking on a mediation role. It shows how serious it is and how little progress there's been.
The human cost is staggering. Over 300 deaths since 2021, including security personnel.
It's horrific. And it just highlights the incredibly deep ethnic tensions, the complex political interests tangled up in it, the historical grievances. It's a perfect storm.
And the spillover effect, destabilizing other communities, that's deeply worrying for the whole region.
It absolutely is. Daily life disrupted, economic activity paralyzed, people living in constant fear. It's devastating.
The analysis also mentions some controversial security approaches. The Inspector General of Police trying to offer priority police recruitment to local youth if they stop fighting. That didn't go down well.
No, reports say he was booed.
What does that reaction tell us?
I think it says the community wants more than just jobs. They want real lasting peace. They want stability. It shows that sometimes security measures or promises, if they aren't really hitting the mark or understanding the local needs, can actually backfire, can worsen tensions.
And the role of politics in all this, the analysis says it complicates things hugely.
Massively. When political interests get involved, trying to gain advantage from the conflict, it just fuels resentment, makes finding common ground so much harder, erodes trust.
Now, the analysis seems critical of using the military as the main tool here. Why is that seen as potentially problematic?
Well, the argument is that traditional military forces are designed more for, say, external threats or counterterrorism, not really for navigating these very delicate intercommunity disputes.
So sending in the army might be seen as heavy-handed.
It risks being perceived that way, yes, as brute force, which can deepen grievances, create resistance, polarize people even more. It might overshadow the need for dialogue for community-led solutions.
So what's the alternative suggestion? Focus more on specialized forces.
The analysis suggests perhaps strengthening something like the Immigration and Boundary Force. They could focus on regional stability, border protection, dealing with any external troublemakers, while creating space internally for non-military approaches to the core conflict.
Right. And the announcement about Otumfu's mediation committee is seen as a positive step.
Definitely a promising development, a real glimmer of hope. But the analysis stresses it needs to happen quickly. Expedited implementation is key.
And it mentions a temporary truce.
Yes, getting firm commitments from the chiefs on both sides for a truce. That's seen as crucial for building confidence, creating an atmosphere where real dialogue can actually happen.
So the overall message is move away from just military force, focus on mediation, targeted security, and addressing the root causes.
That seems to be the core recommendation. A much more nuanced approach is needed. Prioritize mediation, support community efforts, and use security forces in a way that builds trust, not more tension.
Okay, final topic. Gabon's transitional elections, could they be a blueprint for the Association of Sahelian States? Remind us what happened in Gabon.
Right, so Gabon had a coup in 2023. General Brice Oligui Nguema took charge, ending decades of rule by the Bongo family. Then they held a presidential election.
And Nguema won by a landslide.
Overwhelmingly, yes. Around 90% of the vote, with pretty high turnout reported, around 70%, so significant political shift.
And the analysis brings in some polling data, Afrobarometer.
Yes, from 2024 in Gabon. It showed quite strong support among Gabonese people for regular, free, fair elections, about 68%. And most agreed multi-party politics is necessary, around 64%.
And an interesting point about accepting defeat.
Yeah, about 75% thought the opposition should accept election results and cooperate. So it suggests a public appetite for democratic processes, maybe a degree of political pragmatism.
So some see this election as a step towards maybe more transparency and accountability?
That's the hope for some observers, yes.
Yeah.
But, questions remain about how deep or sustainable the changes really are. It's still early days.
The analysis then looks west to Ghana and Nigeria as examples where sometimes transitional elections have helped consolidate democracy, boost stability.
Right, pointing out that elections can be a pathway to more stable, accountable governance, even providing ways to remove leaders seen as corrupt via the ballot box. It shows the potential positive trajectory.
So the idea is Gabon's approach emphasizing national dialogue, constitutional reform, setting clear election rules, could that offer lessons for the Sahel? For countries like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger facing instability.
That's the core question being posed, given the really serious governance problems and public unhappiness in the Sahel.
Yeah, the analysis contrasts Gabon's data with Afrobarometer from Burkina Faso in 2022. High disapproval there.
Very high. 78% unhappy with economic management, 81% with the country's direction, 74% disapproving of how crime and insecurity were being handled. Huge dissatisfaction.
So that highlights a real crisis of governance and trust across parts of the Sahel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Gabon's focus on dialogue, reform, trying to create transparent processes, maybe that offers a potential framework for tackling the issues fueling that discontent in the Sahel.
But it's not a copy-paste solution.
Definitely not. The analysis is clear on that. Gabon's model might offer lessons, but anything adopted in the Sahel has to be tailored to the specific local situation.
What to focus on what?
The priorities have to be real economic stability, security people can feel, and rebuilding that fundamental public trust in their institutions. Those seem essential.
So Gabon offers potential inspiration, but context is everything.
Precisely. The principles dialogue, reform, transparency might be transferable, but the application needs to be homegrown, addressing the unique challenges each Sahelian state faces.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. These critical governance issues in Ghana and the wider region, it's incredibly complex.
It really is. From whistleblowing's tricky nature to formalizing economies, the deep pain of conflict, lessons from transitions, no easy answers anywhere.
But hopefully digging into these dynamics gives you, our listener, some valuable context. Helps navigate the news, form your own informed views.
That's the aim, understanding the why behind the headlines.
So let's leave you with a final thought to chew on. Based on everything we've talked about today, the whistleblowing dilemmas, the Okada formalization potential, the different approaches to the Bawku conflict, what single underlying principle do you think is the absolute most crucial for building effective ethical governance anywhere?
That's a great question. What's the bedrock? It really makes you think about the fundamentals, doesn't it?
We definitely encourage you to keep exploring these topics. If something sparked your interest, dig deeper. Think about how these issues might connect to other things, maybe even your own experiences.
Because governance isn't static, is it? It's constantly evolving, staying informed, staying engaged. That's so important for everyone.